Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell, reporting from the 5 on Your Side Digital Studios on this Thursday, April 13th. Thank you for joining us. It was a big week for Illinois Democrats who finally closed the deal and lured the party, the Democratic Party, to Sweet Home Chicago. Chicago selected for the 8th time in 100 years to host the Democratic National Convention. No other city has more than 3. Cities like Atlanta and New York City losing out to Chicago as President Biden called Governor Pritzker earlier this week to deliver that news that the convention would be coming in August as they look to pick a candidate to run in 2024. It could be President Biden or could be somebody else should he choose not to run, or should voters pick someone else. But this also stands out because for the first time since 2008, when the party picked Barack Obama over Hillary Clinton, the Democratic National Convention is not being hosted in a swing state. We asked Governor Pritzker and Senator Tammy Duckworth about the strategy and their potential.
You know, I think 50 years ago it mattered picking a city in a swing state in order to rev up the get out the vote effort, in July or August before a November election. But, these days, what matters is being able to run a great convention, put on a show that everybody around the country will see.
What will the winning message sound like?
Well, it'll sound like first the nomination of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the values that they have demonstrated in the White House.
You might have heard President Biden's remarks responding to Al Roker, sort of in jest, I suppose, at the Easter egg roll, but he doesn't seem all that sure he's actually running. You seem more confident he's running than he is.
There are legal prohibitions from him announcing that he's running until the moment that he is actually a candidate for re-election. And so I think he's trying to be very, very careful. But I think he's confident not only that he's going to run, but that he'll win.
I think that we have any number of great people to run if the president chooses not to run, but I suspect that he would choose to run, and I fully support his re-election campaign. Oh, I mean, we got lots of great folks, not me. I'm not running. But there are great folks.
Wait, this is a rare
vice
moment.
President to, we got great governors in the state, some of whom I actually served with in the House, to my own governor. I mean, there's lots of folks who could be running. But frankly, if President Biden chooses to run for re-election, then we will support him.
And closer to St. Louis, Illinois' newest Democrat on Capitol Hill, Nikki Budzinski, is marking the 100-day point in her first term in Congress. She sat down with us earlier this week to discuss how her work is going on Capitol Hill. Is there something about the first 100 days in Congress or your initiation that you think would surprise most people? Was there something that, just as an outsider arriving there, was there something that felt new or different or caught you off guard?
Well, I guess I'd say one of the things on election night, I feel like the message that was said to me through the constituents now is that they wanted me to work across party aisle. They wanted me to work to find common ground with people in Washington. And I think when you're at home and you watch what's happening in Washington, D.C., it just looks like a lot of political divisiveness. And so it'd be impossible to find common ground. But what I think is really exciting that I can report to you in this first 100 days is we've actually been able to find some legislation that we've introduced on a bipartisan basis that is going to support the communities in central and southern Illinois. And I'm really excited about that. From agriculture to workforce development, I think there are things that we can come together on in Washington.
From our vantage point in the Midwest, just watching on cable news or in the papers or on Twitter, it does give a cartoonish feel that everything is very hyper-partisan and dug in. And we hear these little tales about bipartisanship, and I just wonder how real is that hyper-partisan polarization?
Well, it's why I sought out to be on the House Agriculture Committee. The House Agriculture Committee, we have a farm bill this year, Mark, which is a big deal. Once every 5 years we negotiate it. It's one of the committees that actually still is known to do bipartisan work. And so I sought that out. I also sought out the House Veterans Affairs Committee. There's a lot of really important work that we can be doing to support our veterans. That's not a Democratic or Republican issue. And so when I had the opportunity, for example, on a bipartisan basis to introduce with Congressman Mike Carey from Columbus, Ohio, a Ways and Means Republican, a workforce development bill that would be a tax credit for small businesses, $1,500, if they hire a pre-apprentice or an apprentice. Mike and I came together on this because we've heard throughout our areas that workforce development, labor shortages are a real issue for the business communities, and workers are looking for opportunities that aren't necessarily a four-year college degree path, but through a community college or an apprenticeship program to get into the workplace. I think that when we can zero in on those kind of opportunities in Washington, Democrats and Republicans can put aside the political noise and actually get things done. And that's what I'm really excited about.
Mm-hmm. Are there companies right now that are telling you, ooh, we would hire them if we could get that $1,500 tax break?
Well, we're in the process of hoping to pass this bill. So as we have been talking to small businesses, anything that's going to help them with their bottom line, I think is welcome. So providing a $1,500 tax credit to somebody that can immediately get into the workforce, I think that's what I heard throughout my campaign and now being in office, is that there's a labor shortage. How are we getting people back to work? How are we getting people trained for the jobs of the future? And I'm very vested in making sure that those jobs are good middle-class jobs.
You mentioned the Farm Bill. Mm-hmm. Certainly there are some agricultural people, industries, and farmers in your district, but to the broader constituency and just everybody, is there some win that you see on the horizon for them? Whether it's in, I'm just going to take some guesses here, the cost of gas, the cost of food. Are there some ripple effect or secondary impacts to people that you can describe that might be in that Farm Bill?
Yeah, I mean, specifically around the cost of gas, for example, I just had the opportunity to, again, on a bipartisan basis, we introduced the Next Generation Fuels Act. That supports biofuel. How that connects to the Farm Bill is through agricultural research, one of the very important titles that we help to fund through the Farm Bill. Agricultural research is actually happening right here in the Metro East area at SIUE with their biofuel center that they have at SIUE. And then at the University of Illinois, we are leading the way in cutting edge agricultural research and tech. That opportunity and those investments happen through the Farm Bill. The Next Generation Fuels Act will help to make sure that we're increasing our biofuels in the mix for our vehicles, which will help us to reduce the cost of gas at the pump, but also support our family farmers with corn production, and then reduce our carbon emissions. So it's really a win-win. These are all opportunities that really are made possible through the Farm Bill and support the communities and the farmers in central and southern Illinois.
It seems these days, every time, I'm going to pivot directions here, every time there's a mass shooting or some big tragedy, America looks to Congress to say, where's the help? What are you going to do? Right before you were sworn in, Congress did take its most significant action on this issue in about 2 decades.
Yeah.
Is there more you can do? What are the next steps on the horizon that you say, you know what, this is something else we can do specifically to make those mass tragedies less likely?
Well, we have a gun violence epidemic, and weapons are clearly a part of this, the proliferation of weapons on our streets. We need to be doing more. I was very encouraged the last Congress did things like strengthening red flag laws, strengthening universal background checks. We need to be doing more. I have said I don't support military-style weapons on our streets. I think that's obviously exacerbating the problems when we see the tragedies of what's happening in Nashville just only a few weeks ago. When children are dying in our classrooms, we need to be doing more to protect them. But second, I would also say, Mark, and I think it's important, we don't pay lip service to mental health. We do have a mental health crisis in this country. And that's one of the things I've been very focused in particular in rural America. Rural health care has particular challenges. The communities throughout central and southern Illinois, making sure that people have access to behavioral health specialists. We have some real challenges and shortages. In Decatur, Illinois, which is on one of the more eastern sides of my district, St. Mary's had announced just a few months ago they're going to be eliminating their behavioral health center within that hospital. What that means for the city of Decatur is tragic. We need to make sure that we are providing more access to behavioral health to get at the mental health needs that we have to really holistically address our gun violence epidemic that we have in this country.
You've alluded to the care. What's the cause?
Well, I think there's a lot. I mean, I think trauma, we're still emerging from COVID. I mean, people have experienced trauma over these last 3 years. I think it's reassimilating back into what this new normal looks like. I think the pressures of everyday life. I think when, we're seeing inflation is still an everyday challenge for people, making stressful decisions, for example, between are they going to be able to provide groceries that week for their family? Or are they going to fill up their gas tank? These are still really real challenges and stresses that people are confronting on an everyday basis, and I think that really exacerbates our mental health crisis.
You said you don't want to see military weapons on the street. Does that mean that if a bill like the one Governor Pritzker signed into law banning assault weapons was to appear across your desk in Congress, would you vote for it?
So what has been proposed in Congress is the elimination of future sales of assault weapons. So future sales of assault weapons, military-style weapons, I don't support. The sale of, if that was something that came to the floor for a vote, I would
that
support.
could include, soldiers in the military carry handguns.
Right.
So how do you define that?
Well, I think it's really important that we be talking to gun owners. I'm a very very strong supporter of the Second Amendment, and I believe that lawful, law-abiding citizens should be able to carry a weapon.
But when you say military style,
when I
you're
say
conjuring
military,
up an image.
the
What is
kind
that?
that would allow for someone to come into a school and shoot with multiple rounds, killing children in a classroom. I think we need to be doing more to get those types of weapons off our streets.
What did you make of the judge in Texas and his ruling to block abortion medications or to strip the FDA of its power to approve that? What does that signal in the direction of this fight over reproductive rights?
It's incredibly frightening, I think, for women. I think women are scared right now. After the Dobbs decision, which took away a woman's right to fully access at a federal level, a national level, their reproductive health care, what you saw over the weekend was more of a government overreach in preventing women from getting access to reproductive health care. We had contradictory decisions that came out of two courts. One you mentioned, the other was in Washington. And so I think this is a case that's actually going to go all the way to the Supreme Court. I signed on over the weekend to an amicus brief that will go to the Supreme Court outlining what this will mean for women to lose access to medication that would be able to provide them with access to reproductive health. I believe fundamentally, Mark, that a woman's decision and what she can do, the freedom that she has to make her own decisions about her own body should be uniquely between herself and her doctor, not the federal government, not Washington, D.C., not a judge. And so I think I'm trying to do everything I can in Congress to lead and protect a woman's right to choose. And what you saw is more troubling news that will roll back those rights for women.
Did you read the judge's decision in Texas where he talked about, I think that the FDA has seen 28 reported deaths over 23 years. They've said that rate, considering 5 million American women have used that medication in that time span, makes it one of the safest drugs on the market. The judge said, yeah, but the unborn. And he said that was a risk that the FDA hadn't considered. Do you think the judge in his rationale was acting on law or on something else?
Look, I think I can't speak to specifically the judge's intent, but what I can see is that this is a troubling, I think something that's been continuing to happen to really scale back a woman's right to make her own decisions about her own body. It's deeply troubling, and I think that we need to be passing at the federal level protections to prevent a judge from weighing in on something. We need national protections for women to making sure that they can make their own decisions about their own body.
Does that include expanding the regulatory framework or the powers around the FDA?
Look, I think that we need to make sure, again, that women have access to the full suite of their reproductive health care decisions. So I think that we need to be making sure that the FDA can help to provide that. I think medication has been a part of that solution. But I think that we need to continue to be fighting at the federal level, not leaving this up to specifically states. This is about the woman's health, her own personal health, her own ability to make her own decisions about her own body. This shouldn't be decided in a courtroom. This should be decided between a woman and her doctor.
I'm a little fuzzy on the timeline, so correct me if I'm wrong. I think you were still in Illinois when the legislature moved to adopt the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment.
Yes.
But that was 40 years ago.
Right.
And critics of the ERA, opponents who fought against it, said there was a deadline and you missed it. Is this a real pursuit to adding this amendment to the U.S. Constitution, or is it messaging?
I think this underscores how much work we still have to do as women to make sure that we have equal access, equal rights. The fact that we're still even talking about this. I think it was in 2019 that the state of Illinois actually ratified the ERA. We should be doing this at a national level. This shouldn't be something that's up for debate. Women and men should have equal access. And I think that you ask about, reproductive health rights. I think this goes to that issue as well. This is about a woman's freedom to make her own decisions about her own livelihood, about her own health, about her own family. Those are the freedoms that any individual should have, man or woman.
Before Congress let out for spring break, Congresswoman Cori Bush was speaking about the Equal Rights Amendment and hoping to add it to the U.S. Constitution. Do you see a real path to do that, or has the time passed?
I would be supportive of that. I think the issue, though, is that elections matter. Right now, we have a very narrowly divided House where the Republicans have about a 5-seat majority. Whether the ERA is going to be able to come for a successful vote on the floor, I'm pretty doubtful of that. But
Under this Congress?
Under this Congress.
But under a Democratic one?
But under a Democratic Congress, I would hope that we'd be able to find consensus and move this forward and get this in the Constitution. I think it'd be a great step forward.
Even barring that 40 years that has passed, you see that that's not an obstacle?
It shouldn't be an obstacle. And in some ways, we shouldn't even have to still be debating it. This should be just understood that a woman and a man should be able to have equal rights and protections under the law.
Mm-hmm. It gets to a question that has interested me for some time, which is, will we ever again update the U.S. Constitution? Mm-hmm. I think that was set as the highest bar because it required the most public buy-in, the most agreement. Yeah. Do you still think there's something that many Americans agree on?
I still believe that there is. I'm still an optimist. I see that as I'm working in Washington, whether it's on the Farm Bill or whether I'm advocating for veterans health care. I'm on the Health Subcommittee on our Veterans Affairs Committee. I think there are still issues, whether it relates to those or workforce development, that we can come together on. And I am still actively seeking out those opportunities to find common ground, both within our own party, but also across the aisle.
So 100 days in, some 735 to go. Are you running for re-election?
Yes, I'm excited to be, I think, yes, in 2024, I expect to be on the ballot. It's been an honor of a lifetime to be able to, serve in this office, be able to work on the issues that matter most to constituents. I will say the constituent service side is so important and is so rewarding. In talking to our team, when we get to close a case, there was a woman actually that was owed $7,000 in Social Security benefits. Our office was able to get that back for her. She had her utilities shut off that day, but because that check came in, she was able to get them back on the next. That is making a difference in people's everyday lives. That's what this work is all about. It's the work that I find the most rewarding, and I'm looking forward to the next several hundred days.
Yeah. You mentioned the Social Security benefits, so I'll just close with this question. There has been some discussion from House Republicans about looking at the future of Social Security and Medicare. So let me pose a hypothetical to you, because there are some people who look at the direction of the numbers and say it's untenable long term. Would you be open to saying, let's lower the retirement age 1 year, starting for people who turn that age in 2070?
Look, I'm not for changing anything with Social Security as it relates to an earned benefit.
You probably wouldn't be in Congress by then.
I will always fight to protect Social Security and Medicare. Social Security and Medicare are a promise, something that has been an earned benefit that working men and women have paid into their entire careers, and they are owed that when they retire. It's why in this debt ceiling discussion, I have signed on with some of my colleagues to a letter to the president to demand a clean debt ceiling lift, which means that we will not allow for any Republicans to hold Social Security and Medicare hostage as a part of that negotiation. I will always stand up for fully funding Social Security and Medicare because that's something that has been earned and owed
so that
to
discussion,
working people.
No matter how far off in the future, is just off the table.
We have to do everything we can to make sure that Social Security and Medicare is solvent, but I will never be supportive of any cuts to those benefits.
I see. Well, thanks for swinging by.
Thank you. Good to see you, Mark.
And we're nearing budget deadlines in Jefferson City as the Missouri legislature prepares to wrap up this 2023 season so far. Right now, the House is proposing drastic cuts to completely defund local libraries. Critics who support human rights and free speech say that those budget cuts might have been retribution or political payback against libraries who sued to overturn state censorship of kids' books.
There's definitely money, and I think this is more about, the lawsuit than about the budget.
Missouri Democrats protested a plan to slash state spending on public libraries to $0 in the upcoming budget.
We have $16 billion in the bank today.
House Republicans refused to reinstate the funds after this debate over state censorship of school books.
When it hit libraries and schools, it started leading to a lot of schools banning a lot of books. A book ban.
That's not what this is. Yes, a school can't assign Johnny a Hustler magazine. That's true.
Giving explicit material, giving Hustler to a kid in a library was already illegal. That was already illegal. Then we wouldn't have needed that bill. So what that bill did was create a chilling effect where schools and libraries started banning things like the children's Bible because of sex in it.
When Missouri passed a new law last year outlawing explicit sexual material in school libraries, books like Batman, White Knight were removed from shelves in Rockwood, The Handmaid's Tale in Webster Groves, The Walking Dead in Lindbergh, and in Kirkwood, the graphic novel depiction of George Orwell's 1984.
It seems almost unfathomable that this is where we're at.
Casey Meehan works at PEN America, a national free speech watchdog group monitoring book bans across the country.
PEN America opposes the idea that you could punish, essentially those who are pushing back against censorship.
In a statement, the ACLU of Missouri said their lawsuit challenging censorship hasn't cost taxpayers a dime and called the threat to defund libraries abhorrent retribution.
For rural libraries, this makes up a much larger portion of their budget than it does for larger public libraries. And in some cases, they're getting federal funds, which is a match based on state funding. So it's like a double hit to them.
St. Louis County Library CEO Kristen Sorth says libraries are often the only reliable source of internet in rural Missouri.
So people come for jobs. A lot of the job training centers around the state in rural Missouri are closing. And so those people are coming to public libraries to do their resume, to look for jobs, all those things, and to fill out federal forms like veterans come and fill out for veterans benefits and things like that.
But whatever comes out of the House has to go through the Senate. And there, in the Senate, Republicans are not so eager to slash funding for local libraries. We heard from State Senator and Budget Chairman Lincoln Huff earlier today.
I can tell you this, the Missouri Senate is not going to defund libraries. I think that was a somewhat punitive cut that the House made, given what they saw maybe happening in very local areas or something. And I think they ended up cutting about $4.5 million worth of state aid to public libraries. My intention as the chair of the Appropriations Committee in the Senate is to restore that, put that money back in. I think the committee, I've talked with most members on our committee, they're very supportive of doing that because we see, look, libraries aren't just books on shelves anymore. These are access points for our communities, for people who are applying for jobs, who maybe don't have high-speed internet in rural communities. These are hubs for people in communities, a lot more than just, a book on a shelf. And I want to see, I want to see us investing in those things and building those strong communities.
Stay tuned for a big dose of city politics in St. Louis as the Board of Aldermen prepare to turn over, reducing from 28 members on Monday to 14 at the new swearing in on Tuesday. We will have reaction and recap to all of that at the same time next Thursday.